welcome back to another off-season edition of Revolution Recap. I'm Sean Donahue. Today we got a great show for you. We had an opportunity to interview Matt Polster, the Revolution midfielder that joined the team mid last season, coming over from Scotland from Rangers. We got a chance talking about last year and what his expectations are for this season, as well as his interesting playing career to date, playing in both Scotland and with the Chicago Fire. Joining me today is Chris Valukas. Chris, how you doing?
Doing fantastic. I had a great interview with Matt, like you said. And yeah, everything's looking great. Revs are making signings. The Twitter feed has been active. So yeah, everything's great.
Yeah, also joining us today is Greg Johnstone. Greg, who's been having some microphone problems today, including during the interview. Greg, how you doing today?
Yeah, unfortunately to our listeners, you won't get to hear my soothing voice during the Matt Polster interview, but you do get to hear me here. So, mixed bag.
But we do have some Revolution signing news that we'll get to after the interview, and we'll get to hear Greg's great voice for that. So, but right now we'll play the Matt Polster interview, and then we'll be back after that with some discussion of some of the Revs' new signings that have come up over the past week. We're joined today on Revolution Recap by New England Revolution midfielder Matt Polster, who came to the Revolution back in July. Matt, how's your offseason going?
Yeah, it's going good. I think the biggest thing for me was just to finally see family on a consistent basis. Obviously, I know the boys were kind of in our own bubble in Boston, and to get back and, see family and some friends it has been good, and I think it's good to get away from the game for a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little hard to believe given how long 2020 felt for everybody that you've only been with the Revolution now. I think today is actually the 6-month mark exactly since you officially signed for the team. Now that you've settled in with the Revs, and the Revs had that deep playoff run success last season, what's your expectations for the team this year?
Yeah, I think the expectations are obviously high, and they were the same as last year in terms of, I think the main goal is always to make playoffs first and then push yourself and see how far you can go within that playoff run. And I think as a group, I think we're proud of what we put into it, but I think we're a little disappointed on the back end of it to not pull through in the conference final game against Columbus. So I know the boys are excited to get back to work and kind of make that wrong into a right.
And last year was a bit of a roller coaster in terms of regular season results for the Revs, but it all seemed to come together just in time for the playoffs, minus that last game, of course. What do you think were the keys to the team's playoff run, and what kind of came together right at the end of that season to make that happen?
I think the biggest thing was just to kind of figure out, formation, personnel. It was obviously difficult. We picked up some people middle of the season, like myself, Tommy, Kakuta, guys coming in, and it's hard to figure out what best fits the team. And I thought, we figured out the formation at the end. I thought Bruce and the staff did a good job of figuring out that formation, the 4-2-3-1, which I think suited us the best. And then I thought personnel-wise, it started to click a little bit. Obviously, getting Carles back as well towards the playoff run obviously helps. You need those types of players to put their change the game for you and make it difficult on the other team. And Carlos is one of those guys for us.
And you mentioned all the midseason acquisitions. You were obviously a big one of those last year. How did the move to New England come together, and what convinced you to join the Revs?
I think the biggest thing that convinced me was just playing for Bruce. My agent called me and said, would you be interested going back to the States? And a couple other teams came up, and when he told me New England was interested and Bruce wanted me to come in and play and play center mid, it sparked my interest immediately, and things kind of spiraled from there. So I think that was the biggest. It was more like a no-brainer for me to, play consistently in my prime. I'm 27, and I wanted to play center mid, and to play for him, it was a no-brainer.
It was obviously a very kind of different year given COVID and everything, and how transfers happened. From the side of a player, was it harder to complete a transfer due to all of this stuff going on?
It was definitely difficult from the standpoint of I was over in Scotland, so having the time difference, and then having to figure out, pack the place up, having to ship it. Rangers and their front office did an incredible job helping me in that process, in terms of just getting the shipping of my stuff back over to the States. I didn't have to worry about that at all. So the transition was as smooth as it could have been, definitely during the times of COVID. But obviously then you have to go into quarantine. And then I was trying to get down to Florida for the MLS's back tournament. Couldn't do that. So it was definitely a roller coaster of of events, but in the end, it benefited me to just get my fitness levels up for when they came back from that tournament to just kind of slide into the team like as I did. So.
And were you looking at all anywhere else in Europe, or were you focused on coming back to MLS, particularly given everything that was going on in the world at the time?
To be completely honest, I wasn't even looking to make a move. I did want to stay at Rangers, but like I said, those couple teams came up. My agents called me, and when it was Bruce in New England, that really piqued my interest. So that's why it even turned into something. I mean, because initially I didn't expect to really leave, but because of the situation, it made sense for me to, play more consistently and play for Bruce in New England at the time.
And you've had a couple of opportunities in your career to participate in U.S. men's national team camp. You got a cap back in 2016. Do you hope to get back in the U.S. picture? And also, do you have any advice for your new teammates, Matt Turner and Henry Kessler, who are getting some of their first shots right now?
Yeah, of course I want to be back in the national team. I think anybody's aspirations as a player is to play for your national team and represent your country. I think that's the biggest honor of all. So for me to get back to that point, I just definitely need to put a really good season in together. And I think it's on myself to play really well. And I think obviously when you do well and your team does well, it gives you that little bit of a push to ask for that call, So if we can kind of replicate what we did last year and go a little bit further, and everybody does their job and we all play well, it just warrants a better shot of getting that call up. And I think the season has allowed, Henry's done really well this season or last season now. And he definitely warrants that call up. Obviously Turner, I think he's one of the best goalkeepers in the league. So it was really a no-brainer for him to get the call up as well. And in terms of what to expect and maybe like motivation, I don't think you really need like any motivation other than to put on that jersey itself, and to be in front of those coaches and be around those types of players at that level. It's going to motivate them. But yeah, I think just go have fun and enjoy that experience in those moments because they don't come around often, and just don't take it for granted.
Hey, Matt, this is Chris Valukas. You mentioned Bruce Arena was a big role as far as you coming back to the Revolution. Just curious, what has it been like for you playing under Bruce Arena?
Yeah, it's different. He has a different coaching style than what I have had in the past. I think back in Chicago, I had Panovich, who was really super hands-on, like stopped the session all the time and wanted to impose what he wanted within that session. Bruce is definitely more free-flowing and allows the players to make those decisions. Obviously, he will stop the session and say, he wants something different, but he allows the player to kind of play free and lets us make those decisions, which I really like, and I think it benefits the players and to be more creative and as a team, just a more free-flowing style of game.
Well, and then you also mentioned that playing center mid was part of the reason that Bruce was able to talk you into coming over back to the States. But we know that you also have experience playing right back. Obviously, it sounds like you have a preference playing more defensive midfield, but care to elaborate on your choices between the two?
Yeah, I think for me, through club days to college and then to my first year as a professional and even in the under-23 national team, I was just always a center mid. That's where I feel the most comfortable and where I feel like I impact the game the most. Things kind of obviously changed in Chicago. I think that's why people, not that I can't play right back and I won't, it's not that I wouldn't do it. Of course I would do it for the team, and if that benefited the team the most, I would absolutely play right back to help us win games. I think what transpired was the fact in Chicago, we signed Dax McCarty, Juninho, and Schweinsteiger, and we all know who those players are, and they obviously have a lot of experience and knowledge and know how to win games, and they're very commanding in the midfield. So to break into that midfield was very difficult. My third year in Chicago when we signed all three. So the transition for me was to find a position where I could benefit the team, and that was right back, and I did that to the best of my ability at the time, and people like me there, and not that I don't like playing it. I just thoroughly enjoy playing midfield, and I enjoy that position more.
Awesome. Yeah. And to double down on the midfield too, the Revolution have made another acquisition this offseason with Wilfred Kaptoum. Do you have any thoughts on Kaptoum and what he might bring to the team?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, obviously a guy with a lot of experience over in Europe and in La Liga and playing at an extremely high level. I think that benefits us, and incorporating guys that, will push each other and making this team more competitive will make us a better team. And not that I didn't think we were competitive this year within the squad, but obviously Bruce did say at the end of the year that he was going to make acquisitions to push players and make this team much more competitive. And I said it when I first got here, I wanted to play for a coach that I wanted to win. So I know he's going to go out in the market and try and get the best players possible to push each other and to win something.
Awesome. And if I can just rewind a little bit too, going back to Rangers real quick, do you have just looking for some insight? What led you to go into Scotland? How did that all transpire? Going to play for Rangers there?
It's interesting how it all transpired. Obviously, long story short, how do I even explain this? So Mike McGee was with Chicago, correct? When I was there, he played with Steven Gerrard when he went to Galaxy. And obviously, Steven Gerrard was my role model at the time when I was younger, and I liked playing, and I wanted to be like him, kind of, And I got the chance to meet him after one of our games, which he didn't play in because I think he was injured. And we just kept in contact. And then when the time came, when he got the coaching job for Rangers, my agent reached out, and we kind of just things spiraled from there. And things just kind of happened, and I was able to make a transition over to Scotland.
So it sounds like you did get to know Steven Gerrard, or at least met him prior to joining Rangers. And you mentioned that he was someone you kind of grew up idolizing and wanting to play like. What did you learn from Steven Gerrard, particularly as a central midfielder, being coached by one of the most legendary central midfielders in the game?
Correct. Yeah. Learned a lot, definitely. How when I was over there, he had an incredible staff with Michael Beal and then Gary McAllister, and those guys and himself just really knew how to ask a lot of the midfielders to cover ground and to command the midfield and how to dominate games through possession and positioning on the pitch. And I learned a lot of just, from them individually, but the expectations from them was just extremely high. And that pushed me when I was over there to come back and want to do the same here and bring those things that I've learned over in Scotland under Rangers now to MLS with New England.
And how does it compare playing in Scotland versus playing in MLS? There's obviously a perception from a lot of people that don't follow the league that is really, MLS is a league with a lot of parity, but there's a perception of Scotland that it's really, Rangers and Celtic and everybody else. How do the two leagues compare as far as a player in them?
I think it's tough to compare. I think obviously, like you said, the fact that MLS is so well balanced it's tough to say it's balanced because obviously Seattle and Toronto were in the finals for 3 years in a row. So
right.
It's tough to say that it's balanced as well. But in terms of that, anything can kind of happen in MLS is I think what you're getting at. And obviously over in Scotland, it's a little different. The expectation for both Celtic and Rangers is the fact that it's unacceptable to drop points, or you just can't drop points, because if you do, then one of the other teams will capitalize on those lost points, and the league kind of spirals from there. It's extremely competitive over in Scotland, I think, just as much as in MLS. Obviously, the biggest difference, like you said, is just the balance of the league is a lot different. Obviously, the wages that Rangers and Celtic can pay is just not the same within the bottom half of the league in Scotland. So it's tough to compare. Obviously, they do have better players and they have better facilities, and those things factor into why Rangers and Celtic are so good in Scotland.
Yeah, and speaking of Rangers, do you still follow them? And it seems like they're having an incredible season right now. Do you think they can actually go unbeaten?
Yeah, I've been following. Obviously, it's exciting for them, and I kind of, not that I expected it, but you could see that staff with Steven Gerrard definitely have been building something for 3 years now, and it's coming to fruition where they are dominating games on a consistent basis. They're keeping clean sheets. They're scoring a ton of goals, and you can see the belief within the squad that they're just going game by game and focusing on one game at a time, and they're just winning consistently. To say they'll go unbeaten, I don't know. It's tough to say. It's a very tough thing to go unbeaten, but I think they are in a very good position to definitely win the league.
And jumping back earlier quickly to your time in Chicago, you had the opportunity to play with Bastian Schweinsteiger. What was that like? What were your thoughts when you heard he was going there? And obviously just another kind of legendary central midfield player that you had an opportunity to play from and learn from.
Yeah, he's such an interesting guy. When you have like big name players come into your locker room, I think that was obviously the biggest one for us in Chicago. You're not sure what to expect. And he was one of the most down to earth guys I've ever been to be with in a team. And he was super cool, super open, wanted to help the team win and was there to help guide us. And I thought he did an incredible job of helping us get to the playoffs. And because I know in Chicago it was very difficult and we haven't done it for a while, for him to come in and take that upon himself, it says a lot about him. But yeah, what an interesting guy, man. I really enjoyed playing in Chicago with him. And no, there's not much more to say. He's just incredible, dude. So.
And one last question for you before we let you go. We've had a lot of people on the podcast this year. They're current players or former players that have all had sort of interesting draft day stories. We were wondering about yours. You went 7th in 2015 at the Chicago Fire. Was that what you were expecting? Did you know Chicago was interested in you? And how did that day play out for you?
It was definitely an interesting time. Obviously, the draft was going into the combine itself. I wasn't expected to really go 7th. I think I was more like a 2nd or 3rd round pick. But I personally believe that was like I should have been up higher, even going into it. And I think that kind of, in all honesty, pissed me off a bit. So going into the combine, I pushed myself, and I thought I did really, really well in those games. And I didn't expect to go 7th from the beginning, but then after having played all 3 games and doing really well, I could see the interest starting to build. And my agent was like, "Look, I think you're going to go top 10. I don't know where it is, but just be ready for anything." And when that happened, I called my dad immediately and my mom and said, "You need to come to Philly." And things started to transpire from there. When I got up to the podium, I honestly basically lost it because it was what I've always dreamt of doing. And to finally, be on the stage and say thanks to Chicago for taking the chance on me and my parents for always supporting me was a really special moment for me, and definitely one I won't forget. It's a really cool experience to be a part of the draft and to finally make your dreams come true. So it's an exciting moment for kids that have really pushed themselves from a young age to get to this point.
Do you think being a local kid at Southern Illinois has helped you get noticed by Chicago?
Not necessarily. I think obviously it's not a huge school, but I thought we did well in respect to what the type of players we had at the time. And they're starting to do much better now. They're making the tournament more consistently. And I think that's going to help kids at that school specifically get noticed a little bit more. I think obviously it's a little bit easier for Chicago to come to my games because of how close it is, but I think things just kind of transpired. I think I could have easily gone to, I think it was 8th was Houston. I think Houston was interested as well. So I'm not sure if that was part of the play, like Chicago being so close, but obviously when I went to Chicago, people thought I was from Illinois and I'm really from Las Vegas. So it was just interesting. It was funny at the time, but I kept telling people, I'm like, I'm really not from Illinois, but I lived there for 8 years in a row. So it definitely feels like home in a way.
Thanks, Matt. We really appreciate your time and best of luck this season.
Thanks. Appreciate it, guys.
And that was Revolution midfielder Matt Polster with his thoughts on the past season, the upcoming year, and his career so far. Thanks so much to Matt again for joining us. We're going to jump in now to talk quickly about the signings the Revolution have made over the past week. There have been a couple of them. Both AJ De La Garza, MLS veteran, 33 years old, who played for Bruce Arena at the LA Galaxy and has bounced around a bit since with Houston, Miami, is coming to the Revolution as a free agent. And on top of that, Emmanuel Boateng, another former player of Bruce Arena's at the Galaxy, 26-year-old winger, will be joining the Revolution. Let's start really quickly with AJ De La Garza. I'm curious what both of your thoughts are on that signing. A versatile veteran defender. Chris, what do you think he brings to the team? What do you think his role might be this season for the Revs?
So I'm looking at the De La Garza signing, and I think it's a good move when we're looking at depth. We definitely need some more pieces at center back. My concern still, of course, I sound like a broken record at this time. My concern is always going to be with height, especially when you're looking at that position. We have Henry Kessler, who's 6'4", but other than that, there's no other center backs on this roster that are over 6 foot. And De La Garza is 5'9", which is going to be a trouble point basically in any aerial challenges or any aerial battles that he might come into. I do think it is more of a depth piece, so it's not going to be a recurring issue that's going to happen all the time. I like having the veteran presence in there and maybe helping out some of the younger guys, getting them more integrated into the MLS game. So I think it's a good signing, but I don't think, nothing flashy about it. And having just that veteran presence, I think, is really what I'm taking away from it as the positive.
Yeah, I think not a flashy signing is a good way to put it. He is a veteran presence. I think that's always a good thing to have. I think having veteran defenders who can play multiple positions, it's kind of hard to be negative about this signing. It is a little bit confusing because, in my mind, I think the Revs are pretty set at outside back between Boutner and Mafla on the left, and then DeJuan Jones at the left, and then Brandon Bai, Tejon, Jones can play there, Polster can play there on the right side. So to me, this seems like a depth center back signing. That's where De La Garza is expected to play, and that's a little confusing to me. He's 5'9". He kind of has the mold of more of an outside back, but maybe they kind of view him as an Andrew Farrell type who kind of moves inward and plays center back kind of towards the middle / end of their career. Not to say Farrell is at his end of his career, but kind of the same type of thing. And in that kind of sense, if you view him just as a backup center back, I would think I would have rather have had Tony De La Mea. Or maybe I guess it wasn't really someone who I was kind of expecting to be just a backup center back. When I was thinking of center back depth, this isn't exactly the guy that I had in mind. So kind of mixed reactions. I feel like he's a good piece to have. As I say, he's a versatile player and he can bring a lot of things. I just wonder if that's really what the Revs need right now, since they're so set at outside back.
Yeah, honestly, I was surprised that Bruce Arena didn't make this signing in the last offseason when he was a free agent, rather than him going to Inter Miami. But it doesn't surprise me that Bruce Arena signed a guy that he's very comfortable with. And they did need depth across the back line, particularly at center back with De La Mea and Mancienne presumably not coming back. And then you look at the right back situation. I think Bruce Arena might still have some question marks there. He didn't seem to be completely sold on Brandon Bai based on him moving to DeJuan Jones late in the season. And then maybe this is a sign that Tejon Buchanan goes back to being a winger. But either way, I don't think AJ De La Garza is going to be particularly expensive. I think he's probably going to end up costing less than De La Mea did. And he can play every position across the back line. So it's kind of a no-brainer to me to add a veteran player that doesn't take up an international roster spot and can play across the back line. I wouldn't expect him to be an everyday starter. I'd expect him to be more of a rotation piece, but I think it's a good move for the Revolution. And otherwise, I'd echo both of your thoughts. But I think that's probably about all there is to say on AJ De La Garza. So we'll move on to Emmanuel Boateng, younger guy that can play on the wing. The Revolution have lost some depth pieces there as far as Christian Pineda being gone, Diego Fagundes being gone, Kuda Mane being gone. Greg, what are your thoughts on the Emmanuel Boateng signing, and what do you think his role will be with this team?
My initial reaction was this is Kakuta Mane's replacement, and I certainly hope he makes more of an impact than Kakuta Mane. Not to say anything about Mane's ability, he certainly showed some flashes when he was on the field, but I don't think we saw enough of Mane, and I think we're going to see kind of a similar role for Boateng, of come off the bench, kind of a speedster that kind of burns down the wings and kind of attacks those tired legs. I think he's a good fit for that role, and similar to the De La Garza signing, this is going to not cost you an international roster spot. It's I don't want to say a cheap signing, but it's not going to break the bank. The Revs still have some money to play with after this. So to me, this is just another really solid piece of the puzzle. It's not going to improve their MLS Cup odds, but it certainly will boost the depth on the bench that can help in late game scenarios, which I think the Revs kind of struggled with, particularly at the beginning of last season. And I think Bruce knows the value of a deep bench, and this is certainly going to improve that.
Yeah, and I definitely want to echo that. It's a depth signing. I don't see Emmanuel Boateng getting a lot of first 11 minutes. He is, entering the prime of his career, so maybe he has still got some more room for improvement. But yeah, both of you are hitting the nail on the head with this one. He's a pesky player. He's fast. He has the ability to score some goals. He's kind of streaky with that. I have watched him quite a bit when he played for LA Galaxy previously. I remember seeing him and thinking I don't ever want to come up against him if I was a defender, because he is that type of player with the ball on his feet. Similar to the De La Garza piece, it's exciting. It's a bit more exciting, I guess, than De La Garza, but it's still not that wow factor that we are waiting on to happen. But I am very happy to see Boateng in a Revs kit and not any other kit.
Yeah, and just, with Greg's comparison to Mane, I kind of see him as a similar fit in the Revolution's lineup, and there's more of an opening to it because Diego's now gone and Christian Panilla's now gone. But salary-wise, they're same age as Mane. I think he's, I think Boateng's a few months older than him. But salary-wise, I think Mane was making something like $400,000 or close to it in 2019, and Boateng was making half of that at $185,000. So, there was talk that maybe the Revolution would go and bring Mane back at a lower salary. I think whatever that lower salary was, they'll probably sign Boateng for less than what you could have gotten for Mane. I'm curious to see what he can offer. There's no question there's a little bit of a lack of depth for the Revolution on the wings right now. So it makes sense to sign somebody for that position. Like with AJ De La Garza, I don't think he's going to be an everyday player. I think he's going to be, a rotational guy. And I always like having speedy wingers on the bench. Maybe it's the FIFA player in me, but I always like having speedy wingers on the bench to run at tired defenses. And Boateng is absolutely that. So I'm very curious to see how he plays a role in Bruce Arena's lineup this season. But it's good to have more options on the wing because the Revolution were short there. And on that note, we did talk about Diego Fagundes. He has signed for Austin. He will not be rejoining the Revolution. I think we'll spend more time on that in another week. I think Diego deserves more time because of what a big part he was of this team. And that would also be a good one to ask listeners for their questions on. But that is the big news of the week. Thanks again to everyone for listening. Chris, can you tell everybody where they can find you on social media and how to follow you when you're not doing a podcast?
Yeah, of course. You find me at Revs Revolt over on Twitter, also on Instagram with that same handle. And then I also live stream on Twitch /Revs Revolt.
And Greg, can you give out the Revolution recap handles?
Yeah, you can follow us at Revolution Recap on Twitter. You can also like our Revolution Recap Facebook page. And by the way, I have my personal Twitter back. My 1-year hiatus from Twitter from my personal account is gone. So you can follow me personally at Real G Johnstone, just to separate myself from all the other Greg Johnstones out there.
And you can follow me at Sean L. Donahue. Before we wrap things up, did anybody have any last thoughts?
The Revs just tweeted out a photo of we're recording this on Friday afternoon. The Revs tweeted out, it looks like Carles Gil's jersey with an armband, and there's no caption. So we might have some news on Carles Gil coming out. If that's the case, it's a little annoying, but I guess we'll talk about it next week. But just before anyone tweets us asking why we didn't tweet about any significant news between Friday and Sunday, that's why.
Yeah, with the tweet of that kit, I'm also looking at it and saying, what's our new kit going to be? So that's something that I'm wondering about that I can't wait to talk about. So that's my final thought.
Well, hopefully we'll have more news on all of that for the next episode. Look forward to that one. Thanks again for listening, everybody. And again, we don't know exactly when we'll be back, but next time there's big news worth talking about, we'll be sure to release another podcast.